So in this video, I wanted to give you some ideas about deliberate exposure that you might do if you were someone who was worrying about having blasphemous thoughts. It's hard to say, blasphemous thoughts. So if you are the sort of person who is avoiding anything that might trigger you having thoughts of the devil, or you are trying to make sure that you never say anything in your head against God, or never think anything blasphemous, that kind of thing, then this is the video for you in terms of getting ideas of how to do ERP so that you can learn to deal with those pesky thoughts differently. So typical kinds of things that we're going to do. First of all, actually, I must say, make sure you have a hierarchy. You can see a video about that, video 12, if you don't already have one. A hierarchy is basically a list of your feared situations, anything that is triggering or you fear would be triggering if you put yourself in it. And then also a really clear idea of anything else that you do apart from avoidance to try and help yourself to feel better or somehow minimize feeling bad or avoid feeling bad. So that might well be, in your case, doing extra prayers, or if you think of the devil or you think a bad thought, you will replace it with a good thought. Anything at all that you do which is designed to try and get you to not feel bad, okay, in this situation. So anything that you do in response, really, to your thoughts. And the thing is, we know now, hopefully you know now from watching these, is the more you respond, the worse the problem gets, right? So over time, the more you've tried to avoid being triggered or convince yourself that you are not being deliberately blasphemous, or that you're a good person, or that you believe in God or whoever your deity is, the more you're actually ending up worrying about it and feeling less sure of yourself. Okay, so we want to use ERP to help you to change your relationship with those thoughts. So you can say, well, you know what, even if that thought pops into my head, it's not a big deal. Look, in fact, I can deliberately make that thought pop into my head. So the sorts of things we might get you to do are things like, right, so I guess simple stuff is anything that you avoid. So maybe going past a graveyard, driving past a church or your place of worship. And whilst doing those things, perhaps if there's specific thoughts or images that you would usually avoid, we would get you to deliberately maybe walk past a graveyard and deliberately say, devil, 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 or I worship the devil, or I love the devil, or something that you really don't want to say, that you would usually try and avoid. Now, these are just ideas. So I might say something and you'll be like, oh my God, that would be so scary. Well, then that's probably something that would go higher up on your hierarchy. So I'm just throwing these ideas out there so that you get an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about exposure and response prevention. Okay, so other sorts of things that we might do would be, print out some pictures of the devil and stick them around your house, on the fridge, beside the bed, on the bathroom mirror, places where you're going to see them. If you would usually avoid thinking about the devil, get the devil around you so that instead of avoiding, you're going towards the problem, and then you can learn to deal with it differently, right? The more it's out there, the more you're seeing something, the easier it's going to become, and the better you're going to get at not responding to any thoughts or feelings that you have about it. What are other ideas? Watching programs that you think are triggering, or reading stuff that you think is triggering. Anything that you feel like would be blasphemous. You could write a blasphemous word and put it in your pocket or in your bag when you go to church or your place of worship. You could dress up as the devil for a Halloween party or a fancy dress party. You could challenge yourself to say the word devil as many times as you can in a day. So you might be like, oh, how the devil did that get there? Or who the devil said that? or any of those things which you would feel were blasphemous and bad, okay? And it can be a complex one for people when it comes to religion, okay? Because we're not saying, oh, it's definitely okay to say these things. What we're saying is, if you keep responding to these worries, you're never going to get out of this cycle, okay? And we're trying to show you that just because you think something or say something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're totally into it or you agree with it, but you can just say it because it's words, and you can do that. And you can stop yourself from getting so caught up in it that your OCD has this hold over you that means that you can't keep going living your life. Any other sort of typical kind of exposures that we might do? I know, like maybe listen to some music that you think is blasphemous, that has sort of, devil stuff in it. Maybe look at some pictures online of devil worshippers. Put a screenshot on your phone of the devil. It's this stuff where it's all going towards the problem rather than away from it. Make a loop tape of the typical kind of thoughts that you have that you wish you didn't have. I love the devil. I'm going to dance with the devil. I'm in cahoots with the devil. Whatever it might be. Write them down, make a list, and then record them like on your smartphone, and then listen to them over and over until your brain goes, oh, so boring, whatever, right? So that rather than when you hear something, your brain goes, oh my goodness, I just thought that, I shouldn't think that. Your brain starts to go, oh, that again. A bit like when there's a song that maybe was out and everyone loved this song, and you're, oh, such a great tune. And then gets played and played and played, and eventually you're like, oh, so boring, right? That's the attitude we want to get you to be taking about these thoughts, okay? So those are just a few ideas of things that you can do. What we want to be clear about is you're going to make yourself a hierarchy, and then you're slowly going to work through it, okay? Coming up with deliberate exposures, which means you put yourself in the situation, you do more of the stuff you don't want, and you respond differently by not doing any of your safety behaviours. And in fact, you're going towards the problem rather than away from it. You're trying to embrace stuff rather than push it away. And you can do that. People often say, how often should I do it? Well, it's sort of up to you. You could, pick one exposure and do it daily. You might find an exposure you think, well, I can do this exposure several times today. Some exposures, say like watching a film, you're not going to do that 3 times a day probably, unless you have a lot of time on your hands. Whereas listening to the loop tape, you could easily do that several times a day. Okay, so there's no exact science, but what you do want to do is just be consistent. When you pick an exposure and you start doing it, keep doing it. So do it one day, then do it the next day, and do it the next day, and notice, how does that feel? Now, you don't have to watch the same film 3 times. You could watch a film and then the next time you could watch something else. Or, usually with a film, because they're quite long, you're staying in that exposure for a long time. So it kind of works on its own. You'll get all your habituation that you need. But you're just going to use a different triggering item. Okay. So give that a go, see how it goes. People might have lots of other ideas. There are obviously lots of other ideas, because it's all about what is your specific fear. How does it manifest for you? What are your avoidances? What are the things you try and do to make it better? So it is very specific to every person. So I'm just giving you kind of general ideas, but people might want to put other ideas in the comments section, and maybe we can brainstorm together so that we've got a big list of the kinds of deliberate exposures you can do to help yourself learn to have a completely different relationship with these thoughts so that you can get on with living your life.